Hello. So, Worlds is about a week away now. It's almost exactly a week at the time of recording and uploading this. But I'm back here in Europe. It's nice to be back here for about a week, and then I'm going to be off to Japan very soon for World Finals and the casting. I can already say right now, I can't say much because, you know, these things are confidential, but I'm pretty sure that this year's coverage of the World Finals will be the best that it's ever been so far. Like, the stuff we're planning is looking really good, and so I don't want to say get too excited, but it's fair to get excited. So look forward to when Bushiroad puts up the official live stream on YouTube, and then you can look at the countdown and all that stuff, and then be able to watch the experience. Obviously, I'll be tweeting about it when it goes live and all that stuff. I think also on like Instagram, Twitter, like Discord, everything I'll post when the stream does begin. So if you don't follow the official Bushiroad channels, etc., then at least you can check out my stuff, and I'll definitely keep you guys updated on that as well. So now that we've gotten that out the way, it's time to talk about the top decks at Worlds. We did this last year, and well, we weren't very close, to be completely honest with you, but I'm aiming to do better this year. Obviously, you know, I am just a commentator, I can only make speculations, but I do know the majority of the roster, however, going into Worlds, and therefore, you know, I can kind of make some guesses as to which decks might be more prominent than others. So we're going to break this down into Standard and Premium, and essentially look at both of them separately and what kind of decks we can expect. Both games will obviously be covered on the same live stream just like last year, so you can expect that much at least. And so I'm going to go through Standard first because I think it's a bit easier to discuss, but also not as much because I think the conclusion I've reached when looking at all these Standard decks, and I mean looking at the meta-analyses we've been doing for this past year, and also just kind of looking at everything about the format now before Bermuda comes in and Revere just stomps over everything, is that it's kind of hard to say who will necessarily win. There isn't a conclusive, this is the best deck, and this will win no matter what, and there's no way this deck can lose, etc. Arguably, you could say in every card game you can't 100% say that, because if they brick, then nothing works out. But, I mean, I'll elaborate on it, maybe this will make more sense. So, essentially the first thing is that statistically, hyu-ga is the best. Like, hyu-ga from all the decks, until Revere comes out, is the best. But there are some things we need to keep in mind about the setting of World Finals. First things first is, Swiss is still best of one. And with a best of one format, what happens with hyu-ga is that if you don't see the hyu-ga, which is literally the backbone and what carries the entire deck, is you're not gonna be able to have a good time, because unless your opponent breaks two, you're already starting from behind, and then that's gonna be pretty bad. And in a best of one scenario, like realistically, with the amount of players that there'll be in Worlds, I think even if you go X2, you don't really have a good chance, or like it's again, you're probably gonna be bubbling into tops if you go X2, so you don't want to be losing more than one game throughout the day. And so if you have a deck that, sure, statistically has topped the most, whether that's because of representation or not is something that we can debate, but when you have a deck that, I mean, sure, statistically the best, but you can only give up a single game per day, you might be looking for a more consistent option. But the thing is that the majority of decks in Standard don't really give you that kind of very consistent option where it's like, okay, I can play this deck and I'll be safe, it's the least chance of breaking, etc., except for Pale Moon. Pale Moon kind of does actually circumvent that, because you have searchability and you have ways to actually, you know, get the right grade 3s, and the deck actually, you know, it kind of lends itself to that kind of playstyle, and it helps you secure that path a bit easier. And so I think Pale Moon will definitely have some showings. It's always been picked throughout this entire format that these decks have been alive. You know, this entire format since BCS started, Pale Moon has always been part of the equation, because it is very strong, consistent, hits hard, big numbers, lots of attacks, no field on opponent's turn most times, so that other decks cannot take it out, and hyu-ga also cannot take it out. And therefore, I think it will definitely see that. I could even see Pale Moon winning. hyu-ga can obviously also see winning, but it's going to depend on how good are the draws of the hyu-ga player, and also what matchups it has. Because even for hyu-ga, going second is going to be a potential problem against two decks, or even three in particular. These are Tachikaze and Aggravain, as well as God Hand. So these three decks are decks that not only, I mean, God Hand is more of the higher roll variant. Tachikaze is very much just, do I go first? Do I draw my grade 3? Do I draw like 1 or 2 of my pieces? I'm good to go. You know, and then Aggravain falls into that same bracket. So if you're going second as hyu-ga, and then you don't have the best, like let's say early game, you might just outright lose before you can even get to your, maybe not grade 3, but before, okay, actually yes, you could lose before getting to your grade 3, but you could also lose before you get the rewrite or you get the soul charge for hyu-ga's field wipe, for example. And if you don't finish the game on that first hyu-ga, you know, power swing turn with multiple Miyomaru's and stuff, then you're not looking too good against those decks, which will be popular for sure. Like those three decks that I mentioned, maybe not so much God Hand, but we saw Ryan Kai, for example, also topped with it just a couple weeks ago. And so, especially Tachikaze and Golds will definitely be popular. Like, I'm honestly, I want to say definitely, I want to say certainly, but nothing is certain. We don't know what the players will actually bring, but like statistically speaking, there's a high chance that people will be bringing these decks because they actually do give you a pretty solid chance of doing good with them. And so hyu-ga is like, a lot of people would want to say, oh, hyu-ga should win this. hyu-ga should definitely be 100%, but there's a lot of variables that make it not so safe to pick, and therefore I think some people might actually forego it. Whether it wins Worlds or not, that's a different question. We're going to see. It's all going to depend. And I think moving on, the other deck that kind of, you know, counters other decks is Narukami. Narukami has been the kind of like anti-everything or anti-Asel to the Asel meta for this entire BCS season, and I think that's not going to stop here. Narukami, even now in Revere season, is seeing some tops, you know, 1 or 2, it's pretty sad, but it is seeing some tops, and I think that won't stop yet. I think, you know, we haven't even got to that point yet, so there's no reason for Narukami to not get picked. We'll definitely see some players take it, and it'll be interesting to see how many people actually take it, because the deck is very, very capable even now after it, you know, multiple sets have come out. It's still very strong, and I think we're definitely going to see it. We're definitely going to see it, I think, for sure. And then another deck for Standard that, again, I could see people pick it because it does feel a bit safer is Shadows, because, I mean, it does need its pieces, but it's not as much of a, oh, I didn't draw hyu-ga, I lose, and it's more of a, like, let's see if I open first or second, let's see if I open Mordred or not, you know, and even then it can kind of adapt because the rest of the deck is so strong, and so the early game that it can generate usually can kind of lead it into being safe for the late game, and plus it has force numbers for defensives, and therefore it kind of has a better matchup against quite a few decks, and so we'll see. I think it's, again, very possible that we'll see some Shadows as well. And then, as I mentioned before, God Hand, Golds, and Tachi, that's your trinity of high roll, go first win. Like, they are definitely in that kind of ballpark, and I think that they might just do that we could easily see that happen at Worlds. However, last year at Worlds, I didn't predict Hamsuke to do as well. I really didn't predict the finals to be Hamsuke mirror match, even though, yes, Great Nature does have a great card pool, but I feel like we're not going to have the same kind of upset, in the sense that we had all these decks that people expected, and then, like, for example, I didn't expect Hamsuke as much. I think I mentioned it, but then I didn't really consider it as, you know, as to be as dominant as the rest. So here I think that, honestly, the decks that I mentioned will more or less be the ones. I mean, we're probably going to see maybe a Great Nature pop up here and there. You know, I could see, like, the most recent set popping up, like that much, you know, with like Neo Nectar and Great Nature, those two that I didn't mention so far. I think I could see them popping up just because, I mean, it's possible, but I don't see much else. Like, you can basically rewatch my last few meta-analyses, and the decks that you see in those charts, that's kind of what I expect at Worlds, more or less. So, again, Uncle Force could also happen. Like, those kind of decks, again, fall into that, like, God Hand and Gold's pool, so that's that. Now for Premium, the part that, honestly, I did want to talk about quite a lot, because this is where things get really interesting. So with Standard, it's kind of harder to say decisive or conclusive things, because it's like, well, you know, this could open badly, etc., etc., and it's very much like based on the decks themselves and just kind of the situation and the state that Standard is in right now. But Premium is interesting because really the way that the whole day will play out is very much shaped by the people that have qualified, because there are some people that have qualified that are known for particular clans, and therefore a clan that some players might not normally prepare for as much, suddenly they have to prepare for because that certain player is playing it. And that's one of my favorite things ever. I really love that, and the fact that Premium will be shaped by that, in my opinion, is going to be really interesting. Obviously, it's also shaped by the meta. Obviously, it's shaped by the popular decks, the decks that people consider to be consistent and strong and worth preparing for, but it just adds an extra level of preparation that everybody has to kind of do in order to make sure that, oh, if I face this one guy that qualified, and I want to make it to the top cut and win the World Championship, then I'm going to have to prepare for this deck. So let's go over the kind of ideas here. So first things first, I want to again mention last year in that many decks can be predicted. Like I said, like a lot of decks can be predicted for Premium, but Worlds the last 2 years has been won by unpredicted decks. Like, I did not think that Blasters would win Worlds in 2017, and I don't think a lot of people did, but there we had Jesus making the call and winning. And then last year I didn't think that Mega Colony would win either, but there we had Call and Lie also making the right call against Asel and winning. So as much anything I say in this segment, while it might be valid and it might actually happen, and one of the decks I mentioned might just end up winning, we could easily see something that nobody's ever seen, some new homebrew that nobody's ever talked about, that's just been sitting quietly in one of the, like, you know, upper teams, like whether it's WCC or Vision, etc. We could see one of, like, some random deck we've never seen before just pop up and take the whole thing easily, because that's what Premium is. That's what's so exciting about Premium. But I will go over the decks that I think will potentially have a showing. So first things first, Asel. Asel 100% will be seen. It's no longer, if you haven't watched any competitive Vanguard or Premium since last year's World, Asel has changed a lot. It went from this, you know, very much, you know, do I open bow mains, do I go first, etc., just like kind of deck, to a lot more interesting because there's a lot more variables, and the deck choices that people make are very different, and they can really adapt to a lot of different scenarios. And then you go first, you go second, Asel can do well. Asel has a lot of options now, and each player might have a little different, like, version of it that they bring to Worlds, and I think that's the most interesting part. So I think Asel has shown the most confident results, that even after Criff got restricted, it still had so many, like, just ways to still do well. And if anything, it feels like after the Criff restriction, it just kept on topping without really slowing down at all. And so I think that's honestly really exciting, just for that in general. And the really good Asel players that really prepare for every matchup will be able to win most matchups, because the deck is able to actually win against the majority of the things I'll mention here, and that's what makes the deck so good. Because, but thing is, a good Asel player can do those things. Somebody that picks up Asel just for the sake of playing it at Worlds and only does some playtesting with it, I don't think they will be. I think that they will find themselves to struggle when they face against the really good players that actually know how to beat Asel, because if you're choosing to play Asel, you're also acknowledging the fact that you're playing a deck that everybody has playtested against, and therefore they know the outs, they know what you want to do, they know your tricks, and therefore you're kind of really starting off on that, like, you know, equal ground in a way if you're playing against something else that you've prepared for. So Asel definitely will be seen, but it's going to be interesting which version of it. I'm not going to mention anything about that because I'd rather see what happens, because, and like, we've had a set of support since the BCS season happened with VBT 10 and VEB 10, sorry, and therefore I think that it's hard to predict what's exactly going to happen. We've had no results ever since, so we're going to see how that paces out. Then we have plants, so Neonectar. This is a bit, again, this falls under this like risky best of one bracket where plants are good and they have topped a lot. Again, statistically very valid, but plants can brick. And plants, when they break, they can't really do too much in your average Neonectar's like player's hands. But one player that we do have qualified for Worlds, for Premium, is Kanyuseiji, who literally began working and writing out and learning plants before it was even released. Like, he was working on Premium plants the moment Katrina was revealed, and posting articles and combos and like options, and the amount of optimization that he knows about plants is insane. And again, this is a clan that got support. We have new cards that we have not seen throughout the BCS circuit that might have strengthened the clan even more. It did get some tops in Japan, so this might be potentially the first ever Western Neonectar top post VBT 10. VEB 10, I keep saying BT. But so we're gonna see whether that happens or not. So again, it's like, on average, maybe Neonectar isn't as scary, but in the hands of someone like Kanyuseiji or any of the other players that have been just practicing and playing that deck throughout the entire BCS circuit, it's much scarier. Like, I think that the deck will definitely have a showing. It is prone to bricking, as I said, but I mean, it's still very strong. Let's just put it that way. It's still very strong, but it's definitely a deck that I think it's interesting whether people will have prepared for the deck as it was before the support, or whether they'll have tried against several variants, which I'm assuming, and then just hope that they face one of the variants they tried, and that one of the players didn't like reinvent the wheel with it and, you know, try out some new build that nobody's ever seen before. Because that's what's really exciting, that we had this one set between the last BCS and Worlds. And so it'll be interesting. I mean, Malaysia technically had it also, I think, already released, but we didn't see it top there, so we'll see what happens. Next is Dark Regulars. I think Dark Regulars is scary, but it's not unbeatable. Like, we've seen from watching BCSs throughout the years that there are some amazing Dark Regulars pilots that have qualified for Worlds because they're amazing at the clan and they just play that clan and they know everything about it inside out. And so it's possible that it will actually top, because if people don't prepare against it enough, or if again they reinvent the wheel and they make a new build that we've never seen before, because Dark Regulars is, you know, it has the card pool for that kind of option, there's a chance that we'll see Dark Regulars topping again. You know, it's gonna be, like, we have Andrew Hesford and we have Togen Kyo that both qualified with DI, at least from Europe, and, you know, just enough, just having said that already, that's already two solid names that could bring the deck to make it really threatening. And so, but the thing is, a lot of the top players, especially the ones that are in teams like WCC, have been playing against the deck a lot, and they have members in the teams themselves that know how to play the deck and therefore teach everyone else. And therefore, if nothing new has been reinvented, I think that it won't be as safe of a pick, and therefore if you face the top players, it might not be that good. And keep in mind, again, Worlds is full of top players, especially for Premium. This is really going to be quite cutthroat in my opinion, where, you know, every little misplay will potentially cost you the entire day. You know, that's possible, but, you know, we'll see how it kind of paces out. Then we have Kagura being the only kind of like control deck. I put it in quotation marks because it's not so much control and more just like denial in a way, because I think this deck should be respected as it does, you know, win various matchups simply by being that like control deck, you know, by having options to mass retire, having some of the best G guards in the game, and just, you know, having that option, and also just the cross and the end actually are a very strong combo, because, you know, you take a Force 2 and you do the Legion, you can recycle triggers, you can do a bunch of restands, and the deck is just pretty crazy in my opinion. So I think that Kagura will potentially have a showing. I don't know what its place is in the meta after Mysterious Fortune, I will say that much. I'm not sure how well it will face against like Neo Nectar now, because before it was a really good matchup for Kagura, but now it should still be, but will it? We'll see on Worlds. So I think that'll be interesting. It's like a deck that I don't know if anybody is actually bringing, and there have been some players that have qualified with it, and like we'll see if it's still viable even after all these months. I think it still will be, because Premium doesn't change that much unless a restriction list comes out or a Premium collection comes out. So I think that meta hasn't changed too much ever since BCS started. And then two more decks that I think should not be ignored, and this I was kind of talking about at the start of the segment, which is Tsukiyomi and Luard. Now Luard has been consistent for literally years now. It's been a great deck to take to a BCS or any event for years. I'm not sure if it will manage in World Finals though. I think it's a little bit like it takes a while to set up, and you really need to be an excellent Luard player to actually pilot it well. There is the advantage that the World Finals should be less rounds than a BCS, because there won't be, you know, hundreds of players. It's just the selected players that actually qualified, and therefore you won't have the same like mental strain of like playing Luard the entire day to actually worry about, because it'll be less rounds. So if you're already used to playing Luard for BCSs, then I think that those players will definitely have a fighting chance. But Tsukiyomi wanted to mention because a lot of people after Ichikishima got hit were thinking, oh, OTT now is not a threat because, well, I mean, Ichikishima's gone. But then we had players like Mohamed Abumalula who picked up Tsukiyomi and top with it. And this is a player that is literally famous for OTT and always reinventing the wheel with OTT and just trying out random wacky stuff that works. And it does. It really does work. And he qualified once again with his favorite clan and with Tsukuyomi in Premium. And the deck is just really good. It really does reward smart players and good players that are able to pilot it well. And that's what I meant by, if you've been preparing for just the clans that I mentioned until now, you should add OTT to your list of decks to prepare for, because if Mohamed takes OTT to World Finals and you face him and you didn't prepare for it, chances are you're going to lose, because that's just, like, that's literally a master of his craft in a way, and if you want to beat a master of his craft, you have to know about it. And so I think if you don't, then you're going to have a tough chance of topping at Worlds, and therefore it's something that needs to be considered. And I think that's, you know, important to point out. And so, but I mean, he could obviously not take it. There is a chance he won't take it, but I feel like it's still a very strong deck even now, because it's been topping in Japan, it has been topping in the West, and therefore good results, therefore it's a safe pick, I think. I think the only like big surprise deck like Mega Colony was last year to me would be Great Nature. The deck is very good after the latest support. I wouldn't say it's too crazy, but it can be expected, simply because it has this like Denial Griffin Plus with the new Grade 3 that recently came out, where you can basically just like pop a column while guarding another column with a G-Guard, and on top of that, like, you have that plus all the usual stuff that Great Nature does, and then Isabel to boot that lets you just do even more. So Great Nature, like, from what I've played against it, felt very strong in Premium right now, although I'm not sure if it's strong enough to beat everything, but I'm sure that, again, there are really good Great Nature players that could, again, take it to Worlds this year. And I mean, a lot of people took Great Nature to Worlds last year as well, or not a lot, but I mean, like, considerable names, let's put it that way. And I think that there is a chance that it could top as well. And again, as I mentioned at the start, there's a chance that nothing I've talked about will actually win Worlds, and instead it'll be something that nobody's ever seen in their life, and will therefore, after winning, dictate the meta for the next coming months and the Team League season. So that's going to be interesting. I think Worlds will be interesting because, especially for Premium, whatever happens will more or less dictate Team League, because Premium Collection 2020 doesn't come out until the middle of the year, and therefore you can't really, like, the meta doesn't change that much. Like, I think even looking at Vanquisher, I don't think that Narukami will suddenly enter the meta because it just doesn't have good strides right now. And then, you know, that's just how it's going to be, I think. And it's been a really interesting BCS season for Premium. I've liked the format that we have right now. I think it's definitely very interesting, and there are still more decks. There's one deck that I want to talk about in the video that I don't think anybody will actually take, but it does have a pretty solid matchup against the meta right now, and I think that it could be interesting if somebody does catch on to it, because it's a very, very cool deck, so we'll see about that. But yeah, those are my predictions for Worlds. Please do let me know your predictions for decks as well. Also, what do you think, which decks will actually come out on top? Don't forget to tune into the live stream when Worlds does go live next week on the 19th of January, because that's going to be really, really hype. I will be casting together with my co-casters of Carprotagonist and Kai from WCC, so that's going to be really, really fun, and I hope you guys enjoy everything we've been preparing. It's going to be a lot of fun. Honestly, there's a lot in store for you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy everything that we're working to bring to you guys. So that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check out all the stuff in the description, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.